personal longtime friend, Mr. John O'Connor. And I believe we are going to be joined by IQ Rassolli and the fantastic Dan Perkins here in just a few moments. Dan has joined us, and so is IQ. We have got John O'Connor with us today. We are going to go to our other guest as soon as we wrap up here with John. But John, there is a lot going on in the legal world. First of all, chat with us about some of the different things that you see going on, because you're always paying attention to everything, my friend.
Well, first of all, in the Trump civil case,
yeah,
what is most interesting to me is that the judge is getting ready to, first of all, to get Trump a judgment of about $250 million against him. Yeah. And secondly, to try to forfeit all his business licenses. Now, here's the problem. The problem with the damages is they are not damages under New York law. When you defraud somebody, there's a specific measure of damages called out of pocket. Yeah. I can defraud somebody into buying my car for $6,000, but if he turns around and says, "Oh, it has a cracked block, I don't like that," and then he resells $6,200 the next day, well, guess what? He hasn't lost anything, So that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Is that there are no losses yet? He's going to get. That's going to happen to him. The second thing is, given the fact that there are no losses and no complaining victims. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Hi, John.
Then there are no victims. Now, if the judge suspends his license, really, which is forfeiting his right, it's a forfeiture.
Yeah.
And under the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution, forfeitures fall within the excessive fines and penalties clause of the Eighth Amendment. And Justice Ginsburg just wrote a scathing decision in that in 2019. And if the judge, in a case where there are no damages and certainly no victims complaining, then suspends Trump's licenses, which are worth an awful lot, and his buildings are worth an awful lot, that's clearly an excessive fine or penalty. So right there, I see that being a big deal in Trump's civil case. And to me, that's about everything. Now, all the other criminal cases are unholy messes because they're so unwieldy that I don't see them getting to or finishing anytime soon.
Jim, do I have time to off John?
Oh, you've got some time, Dan. Okay, that's why John's here with us.
How are you, sir?
Just good, Dan. Yeah.
Okay, good to see you. It's been a while. I'm going to practice law, which means I didn't pass the bar. I'm still going to practice anyway. John, this judge set himself up as the arbitrator, saying that Mar-a-Lago was worth $18 million. He is not a licensed appraiser. He doesn't have a real estate license. And he gave to my understanding, no definition of how he determined $18 million. All the experts say that it's probably worth over $200 million. When he opened up his mouth and the assets, did he jeopardize his case?
Well, he did, Dan, because what he used was he actually did give a rationale, which is the tax assessment. He said the tax assessment, which I believe him to be $18 million, has nothing to do with the value. We can all have our properties valued at different things. Who would ever think to go who's got a house for sale in San Francisco and say, hey, your house is only valued on the tax rolls at $100,000, so therefore I'm going to only pay you $100,000. And so that's what this judge said, and what it does, it reveals a profound lack of knowledge.
Absolutely. I couldn't see how, I don't know whether it's enough to cause a mistrial, but as you said a few moments ago, nobody got hurt. The banks got paid. The insurance companies got paid. The banks did not use the Trump's appraisals, because they don't do that. They make their own appraisals. because they have a fiduciary responsibility to the depositors at the bank to make sure that they're making prudent transactions. So what crime did he commit?
Well, you bring up a good question. You frame the other legal problem with it, Dan, because the statute prohibits fraudulent or illegal practices. Now, they're claiming this is fraudulent. They don't claim it's legal. But in order for something to be fraudulent under New York law or any of the other common law jurisdictions in the United States, you have to have intent to defraud, but more importantly, you have to have reliance by the counterparty to his detriment or damage. This is asset-based lending. So clearly the lenders were not relying on Trump's personal financial statement. They were relying primarily on the
See what happened there. There's a Skype hiccup. I hate the internet. Sometimes I just absolutely hate the internet. But we're going to get John O'Connor back in here. Dan Perkins, I can see the streamer is connecting to server, which is always fun. And IQL Rassolli, of course, will be back with us as well. And as soon as they get back, they will pick up where they left off. And the only people that will hear this would be the people that are listening to us on the podcast or listening to us on Dan Perkins Media. But we will see what happens here. Everything is slowly but surely reconnecting. I think we might have John and Dan and IQ back with us here in just a few seconds. Oh, okay. So it hung me up. That's good. That's good. There we are. Okay. I think we might have everybody back. A little bit of a Skype hiccup there. We'll see if Dan and John and IQ will be back with us here in just a few
he
seconds.
can do that.
Yeah, he did.
There he is.
There's
Jiggy.
are. I don't know. The internet is always so much fun.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know either what's happening.
But
Exactly.
but John, one of the things that I think is amazing about all this stuff with Trump is they just continue to bog this guy down in court over and over and over and over and over. What is going on there?
Well, you got exactly right. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to bog him down. Now, the issue is he's getting so much publicity out of these trials that in a way, maybe he's doing okay. But that's one of the real problems with this. It just is a violation of our norms. That's why I did not object when James Comey let Hillary off on the classified documents when she was the leading candidate of a major party for president. And I thought, in a wobbler of a case that you don't have to bring, that clearly she violated the law, but if she did get prosecuted, she'd get a slap on the wrist. I thought it was within sound discretion, not Comey's, but of Loretta Lynch's, who was afraid to exercise that discretion. But it certainly would have been within the discretion not to prosecute Hillary Clinton. And I said so at the time, because I think it interferes with our democratic system. And in fact, the Justice Department rules say that you should not interfere with an election by giving an indictment shortly before the trial. So in this case, because campaigns now last over a year, they're trying to do exactly that. And it's just not, it's dirty. It's dirty is what it is.
John, let me ask you a quick question. If we look at what's going on in these various trials, the New York case in my lawyerese is more dangerous, or not dangerous. It's more abusive than perhaps the other three cases. But my question to you, John, is: do you think the American people believe, when it comes to the security of presidential documents, that Joe Biden broke the law?
Well, of course he did. Because remember this, Trump was not trying to use his documents in any way. He probably wanted to stash away some Russian collusion things for future use. But other than that, he was not using anything. And he had the right to some degree of grace period before he had to hand everything over. Now, should he have handed them over when they were asking him? Of course. And as a matter of fact, he tried to negotiate with the Justice Department and say, look, I'll give you all the documents, but you got to make sure you let me see my Russian collusion documents, which he has a right to under the statute. And they said, no, we're not going to let you see those. People don't report that, but that was hidden away in a New York Times article. But that's a big deal, because if the Archives was not going to do its duty under the Presidential Records Act, which gives the president the right to see everything and to use everything, he just can't technically own them, and he's not supposed to have custody of them, even though he has access to them. So it's a very technical thing. Barack Obama has all his documents now, but of course, he's in a government warehouse paid for by the government. So the government says, aha, we have custody of him, even though we never see him. Obama sees him every day. So these are very fine legalistic distinctions. Now, let me compare it to Biden. Biden had these documents from his Senate days, and certainly from his vice presidential days. And there's every indication that he was using those documents, if for nothing else, just to tout his influence. Oh, look at what I've got. Why does he bring them to the Penn Biden Center, financed by the Chinese, unless they're there at least for show, if not for actual research? So he can come up to a client and say, look, here's the way we think about China. Here's the way when I was in my confidential meetings in the White House, here's our strategies towards China. So it looks to me like the only reason for Biden to keep those would be for his use. And if you are now using confidential documents, now you've got a whole serious crime. Now you're using confidential information without authorization. And he's had these documents for well over 20 years. I mean, because it goes back to his Senate days, pre-vice president. So nobody makes these distinctions, and everybody acts like the whole idea is, oh my gosh, he gave them back as soon as we found out. Well, yeah, it may have taken us 20 or 25 years to find out that he had them, but did he not know he had them? That's the question. Of course he knew he had them.
But John, doesn't this send and reinforce the message that a lot of people in this country believe there's a dual standard? Doesn't the Justice Department say that they're not going to, he broke the law, just as much as Trump broke the law, but they do all this stuff for Trump and they do nothing for Biden, that there's a dual standard, Democrat versus Republican?
Well, I agree with you on that, although I would even argue further, Dan. I would say they're not the same. I would say Biden's worse for the reasons I just stated. And remember this, a president just recently out of office has a little grace. This guy has as a senator, he has no
grace period
at all. And as the vice president, he had no grace period. And, right. And so it beggars belief to say that he didn't know he had him. Of course he did. Trump knew he had him, but he thought he was within his rights in holding on to him for various reasons. For instance, the right thing to do for Trump would have been to go to court and say, look, here, I believe some of these are my personal documents, and so forth and so on. There's another one, I forget the other. Privileged documents. Some of these are privileged. But my point is that even if his objections to turning them over were not really availing, it sort of denies criminal intent. I think on the document case, it's a very weak case for the mishandling of documents. And I think if I were the prosecutor, I would go after the causes of action at Mar-a-Lago that are really, truly, even though Trump got goaded into it, he probably did obstruct justice in the Mar-a-Lago case, counts 33 to 41. Of all the 92 counts, those 8 counts are the only ones, in my view, that mount to a hill of beans. And this is where the prosecution is kind of stupid. The public doesn't know what I just said, and we're probably never going to get to the Mar-a-Lago case. So all the public's going to see is the 83 counts that are clearly, as you say, Dan, a dual system of justice put on steroids. Even as to the 8 counts, come on now, Hillary, is bleach bidding her computer and and all that stuff and hiding 30,000 emails. She's not charged with obstruction. And so I do think, and people see that, and people see this is one of the things people don't understand about the Trump phenomenon. The two pillars of his strong support are A, dual system of justice, and B, fake news. So now here we have fake news and a dual system of justice all over again. And if you didn't have those issues, if everything was on the up and up, we'd still be nominating the Mitt Romneys of the world and so forth, and the Jeb Bushes. People are so sick and fed up of all this because they have the sense that they're being conned. There are people promise things in elections, and then the whole establishment, the deep state, et cetera, to the media, comes in and buffaloes everybody and cows any Republican into being a rhino by definition to save himself. What they love about Trump is Trump says, screw it, I don't care what you say. I'm going to do what I think is right. And people go, yeah, finally somebody has the brass objects here big enough to say, to hell with you guys. And that's his attraction. And that's what they don't understand. Trump was not doing so well in the polls when he sort of screwed up the Georgia runoffs and, and all this stuff. And he didn't look good on the January 6th stuff. And then all of a sudden they started persecuting him and his support goes through the roof. People don't understand this. It's part of his appeal to people that this is almost their last stand. People know that they're getting screwed. And look at January 6th. Forget about Trump's role in January 6th. This guy, Daniel Perna, I think his first name's Daniel Perna, who committed suicide after being charged for 14 minutes of taking pictures in the rotunda. That's all he did, nice young kid. And he decided, I'm going to plead guilty and get on with my life. And the prosecutor puts a terrorism enhancement on his charges, which would have given him 20 more years in jail. He committed suicide. He was so undone by it. That's what people react to. That's the kind of overreach that people react to. Yes, everyone with any sense knows that January 6th had some bad actors, but it's complete overkill to ruin lives. At the very same time, there are 160 riots throughout the United States where people are getting shot. Policemen are getting shot. Innocent people are getting killed. Their businesses are being burned to the ground. Middle-class people, many of them in the inner city being people of color, and yet their businesses are being burned to the ground and nobody's getting prosecuted. You don't think people are going to notice that? Do you think people are all going to believe Liz Cheney when she says, oh, all these people protesting the election they're telling the big lie? And this is the worst thing that's ever happened in our country's history, right after these riots. I mean, people with common sense in normal America that did not go to Harvard and did not have prosecutors saying that black is really white and up is really down, who just sort of have common sense, they see that this whole system is our undoing. And it is now undoing us on the world stage with Israel, Ukraine, and so forth, Taiwan. All those countries are in danger because of this fuzzy thinking. Most people of common sense have had it. They've had it up to here. And I think Trump's getting stronger by the day.
Jim, are we having the other guest or not?
He has, I guess we'll just say he's bailed. I'm not sure what happened. Here's a little bit of details. I'm gonna fill John in on this. We had John O'Connor scheduled for the first 10 minutes of the show. And then we were supposed to go to a debate with a Dr. Nerudin, who is he is an author. He's got a health book, but he also converted to Islam, and he wanted to have a debate with, of course, IQ Rassolli on Islam. And I had it all set up. We were ready to go, and then I can't get him on the phone. I can't get him to answer email. So he's gone.
Why are you surprised?
Why am I surprised?
Why are you surprised?
I never figured it was going to happen, Jim. I mean, when the guy said he wants to debate IQ, if he's listened to this show at all and heard how articulate and how smart IQ is, he had no chance. And I think he just wanted some publicity, and then he disappeared.
So, John, it's another day in Jiggy land.
That's right. I think probably IQ is probably not his real name. I think IQ is his nickname because he's so damn smart.
You're right, by the way. You're absolutely right. That's my pen name.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's very hard to argue in this situation unless you're surrounded by Harvard undergrads who think that Palestine is being occupied. Unless if you have a regular audience, it's very hard to defend what Hamas has done. It's just impossible, and it should shock the conscience of any decent person. And so I think people know that if they get into a fair debate with a regular audience, you're going to lose that. You need your fixed audience. You need your fans in the audience here. I'm just undone by the amount of support that the Hamas is getting on this thing. And if you think about it, think about where we're going here. The people everyone is saying, and the entire intellectual group in New York has been saying for years how stupid those on the right side of things are, or the conservatives are, they're just stupid. And now, and clueless. And now what's being revealed is, as the covers come off, what's going on the left side. It's all of the right side of the spectrum that says, yes, we have to defend Israel. We have to do something. This is terrible what happened. And guess who's coming out in favor of the Palestinians? Bernie Sanders and his ilk. And it really should sicken everybody and give everybody second thoughts about what this progressive movement is about. Let me add this. People will not understand this. Hitler was a progressive. Not National Socialism means socialism. It just is not of the international socialist type. It's socialism for the country. He is a socialist. He was a progressive. Fascist is a symbol for the labor movement that Mussolini started. Fascism is a bundle of fibers tied with other fibers like a bundle of wheat. It's the symbol of sort of revolutionary socialism. And so here we are in a situation in which there are really, ironically, a bunch of Hitlers out there screaming for the heads of Jews. And where are we? And there is no sense of irony. There's no sense of shame. People don't know what a fascist is. They call Trump a fascist. I say, well, wait a second. What exactly is your definition of a fascist? Is it a guy that is kind of big and bold and says a lot of off-the-cuff things? That's their view of a fascist. No, a fascist, that's not a fascist. And so you have the other side of the fence that are really acting in accordance with authoritarian socialist principles. And now what we've got is Bernie Sanders coming out and saying, Israel's got to agree now to a right of return for Palestinians. That means that they can come back, and if in 1948 their ancestors owned land that Jewish immigrants bought, or bought at tax sales after everyone fled in the 48 conflict, that somehow they have a right to return to Israel. So that's the kind of thing that Bernie Sanders is demanding now. Seems to be defending Hamas, seems to be defending the whole Palestinian deal. So we have an odd situation here of a very much of an unlearned culture no one would think. And then now, of course, it's okay now to have explicitly racist categories to select your faculty. You can select somebody because they're black, a person of color, or this, or that, part of the queer thing, whatever. But we can be explicitly racist now. It's okay to have black-only dorms and so forth and so on, and Muslim-only dorms and so forth. That's not in the American tradition. We have to get away from that, not toward it. And so there's a certain irony in everything that's happening on the left. And even if you agree that fascism is a right-wing thing, which it is not, Hannah Arendt said that when you take communists, when you take liberalism and conservatism and you go so far with each of them, you end up with communism and fascism colliding. And that's what we've got today. I don't think fascism starts on the right, but we do have fascism and leftist thinking are the same thing. And so, but that seems to be lost on people. George Bush goes into Iraq, and of course now they show him as being Hitler. People don't understand their history. They're all ignorant, and it's just very, very depressing to me.
Jiggy, how much time do we have with John?
We've got a couple more minutes with John. Why don't you ask one more question, and then I want to get John's thoughts on a legal issue, and then we'll let John go for the day.
I want to ask John about the border. When did we change the law that said if you wanted to come into the United States, you had to have a job, a sponsor, not dependent upon on any social welfare from the federal government, and a place to live? Did we get rid of that? And that allows all these people to come across the border?
Well, I don't think even in the past it was okay if you had all of the foregoing. I think that may have been a rule that they put in to sort of an administrative made rule, and they on the idea that they could adjudicate the person's status. I think that usually would deal with an asylum claim if you claim asylum. But I don't think you even before this had the right to come across the border and say, hey, I've got a job, so forth and so on, let me stay here. You didn't have that right. And
you didn't have a green card.
You needed a green card to come over, exactly, or you needed a visa.
Yep.
Yeah.
And these things were serious deals. And if you remember back in the day, even during Clinton's time, Bush's time, if any nominee to government service ended up, oh my gosh, hiring an illegal alien, that person was disqualified from office. So many people tried to beat Clinton's attorney general and couldn't do it. They'd hired a Hispanic maid or something. Now look at our standards. Now, there are millions pouring across the border and so forth. And at least Trump tried to put some order in there. He did a decent job, and he was on his way to doing a better job. But it's out of control now. And now with all these people coming in, anybody that's born here I think, has birthright citizenship. And so it's what it is. It's a bunch of Democrat votes.
I just want to follow that, Jiggy, just real quick.
Yeah.
So if Donald Trump gets in and at least one of the houses of Congress is in Republican control, he will not be impeached. And if that's true, watch out, Katie, bar the door, because he's going to clean house all over the place.
Well, he's not going to get removed anyway, Dan, because the Democrats are never going to have 2/3 in the Senate. So impeachment is nothing. I think it's very hard. There's some pretty good law, at least in federal court, about not indicting a sitting president. So they'd have to get him in New York State, and that's not going to happen.
So do you think Biden's going to get impeached?
No, it's too late in the day, and it won't do any good, and it'll look political. It takes too long for the process to work. And so I think they're doing the right thing by having an inquiry, which will let the American public see all the evidence. And the evidence is increasingly looking like it shows corruption. It's pretty clear to anybody, and the more if you see the evidence. So I think what the Republicans should hope for is that Biden doesn't drop out. I think you got to watch out about getting rid of him too soon.
Okay,
Jim.
Before we let you go, John, I have got to get your thoughts on some.